My name is Aisha. I'm 23 years old, and the day my parents told me daughters don't need education was the day my future was decided, but not by them, by my grandmother, and by a will they never expected. I grew up in a house where dreams had different values. My brother's education was called an investment. Mine was called unnecessary. Relatives would visit, and my parents would proudly say, "Our son will become an engineer." Then they would look at me and say, "She just needs to learn how to manage a home." I was never seen as a future, only as a responsibility. But I loved studying, not for praise, not for marks, because when I studied, I felt free. Everything changed the day my college acceptance letter arrived. It was a respected university, merit-based scholarship. My hands trembled as I held the envelope. I thought this was my turning point. I showed it to my parents with hope in my eyes. They barely read it. My father folded the letter and placed it on the table. Then he said calmly, "Daughters don't study this much. We won't waste money." My mother agreed silently. That was the end of the conversation. I tried to explain the scholarship. I offered to work part-time. I promised to reduce expenses. But this was never about money. It was about control. My father finally said, "If you study too much, no good family will marry you." That night, I cried quietly, not because I was refused, but because I was never understood. The only person who noticed was my grandmother. She lived in the old part of our house, quiet, observant, always listening. One evening, she called me into her room. She didn't ask why I was sad. She simply asked, "If education was free, would you study?" I said yes immediately. She nodded, as if she had just confirmed something important. That was all she said, but something had already begun. Weeks passed. My admission deadline expired. Life returned to normal for everyone except me. I stopped asking, stopped arguing, stopped dreaming out loud. But my grandmother began making phone calls, meetings, documents, visitors. No one paid attention. After all, she was old, and old people in our house were expected to stay silent. 3 months later, everything changed. My grandmother fell seriously ill. The whole family gathered at the hospital. Before her condition worsened, she asked for one thing: a lawyer. That evening, the lawyer arrived with a sealed document. And then the truth came out. My grandmother owned more property than anyone realized: land, savings, investments, and she had changed her will. The lawyer began reading. Her entire property would be divided among all grandchildren equally, but there was one condition, one rule that could not be ignored. No grandchild will receive inheritance unless they complete higher education. The room fell silent. Then the lawyer clarified, "This applies equally to sons and daughters." My father protested, "This is unnecessary. Boys already study." My grandmother, weak but firm, whispered, "Property should go to those who can think, not those who can control." My parents tried to challenge the will. They argued tradition, they argued culture, they argued authority, but legally the document was final. If they stopped me from studying, they risked losing their inheritance. Suddenly, my education was no longer a debate. It became a financial necessity. The same father who rejected my admission started searching for colleges. The same parents who denied my dreams began calculating tuition, not for my future, but to protect their own interests. And honestly, I didn't care why the door opened. I only cared that it finally did. 6 months later, I walked into college, not secretly, not with permission, but with protection. For the first time, no one stopped me. And sometimes freedom doesn't arrive as support. Sometimes it arrives as a legal condition. My grandmother passed away the following year. Before she left, she held my hand and said, "I could not study, so I invested in someone who would." That was her revolution. Quiet, strategic, permanent. She didn't argue loudly. She didn't fight emotionally. She changed the rules. And when rules change, power changes. Today, I am completing my degree. My brother studies. I study. Same table, same house. But one thing is different. No one says daughters don't need education anymore, because now education is not just respect, it is inheritance. And sometimes justice doesn't shout. Sometimes it waits quietly, inside a sealed envelope, waiting for the right moment to be opened.